Welcome back. So we are going to move into, our next discussion will be focused on Nigeria in the era of COVID-19 and the objectives of the Nigeria Solidarity Support Fund in creating a change. We have with us this morning the chairman, Nigeria Solidarity Support Fund, Mr. Babatunde Folawiyo. He joins us from Ikoyi via Zoom. Thank you so much for being here. And
Great
also,
to be here. Thank you very much. Yeah.
And also the co-founder and Chief Policy, Impact and Government Relations Officer at Global Citizen, Michael Shedrick. He joins us via Zoom also from New York in the United States. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Okay, let me quickly start with Mr. Folawiyo. So the mission of the Nigeria Solidarity Support Fund is to vaccinate 1 million Nigerians by 2022. How do you intend to do that?
Thank you very much indeed for having us. First thing is that the mission of the NSSF, as we call it for short, is not actually to vaccinate 1 million people. That's the immediate mission. Our overall mission is to prepare, first of all, strengthen the healthcare systems that have been under serious assault by this COVID pandemic, to also help and support the most vulnerable Nigerians, who are the ones who have been hardest hit by this pandemic. And thirdly, to reskill and retool the Nigerian youth for life post-COVID, because it's clear that life will not be the same after COVID, and we need to strengthen those skill sets to approach life after COVID. But as part of that whole initiative and the mission, we feel that the immediate requirement right now is to vaccinate as many people as we can. And we know the major efforts that government is making. We see them, we feel them. But we also know that the government needs help, and we are offering ourselves to help. And of course, you can't succeed in anything unless you have a target. And our target is to, within the next few months before the end of the year, try and see if we can assist in at least vaccinating 1 million people. We hope that there'll be tens of millions vaccinated, but at least we've set ourselves a target as to what we feel we can do.
Okay. Now that you have told us what your goals are, let me go back to the questions you asked you. So one of your goals is to vaccinate 1 million people. How do you intend to do it?
Okay, very not simply, but the idea is we believe that cooperation is the best way of making achievements, and therefore we are partnering and we're in discussions with the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, who have been at the forefront of this. And we are teaming up with them to reach into the areas of Nigeria that have not been supported so far. And we have set up a system of teams that we're going to provide to assist in this vaccination effort. So we're not trying to do it alone. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're trying to facilitate and support efforts that are already on ground. I mean, the NPHDA have done a fantastic job so far. Their impact has been felt all over Nigeria, and we just feel that we can support them by bringing extra hands to the table and putting all hands on deck. So we do have a plan. We have a very clear plan as to how we want to do this.
Now, Michael, you are the co-founder of Global Citizen. What exactly is Global Citizen and what does it do?
Yeah, well, it's essentially Global Citizen is a movement of millions of activists around the world. And we work in complementarily to the NSSF, the aims of the government to vaccinate its people. And whilst it's obviously the prerogative of the government and responsibility to ensure its citizens are vaccinated, where civil society can play a role is to ensure that no one is left behind and that governments and not-for-profits and other groups actually have the resources to vaccinate the people, the health workers on the front line. And so right now, Global Citizen is campaigning around the fact that globally around the world, you have this gross inequality where 80% of the world's vaccines that have been administered have been in rich countries. And if you look at a country like Nigeria, less than 2% of the population is fully vaccinated. And yet across the G7, the wealthiest countries in the world and the European Union combined, they alone have 1.7 billion excess doses that will be sat there through the end of the year, notwithstanding the need for booster shots that could be distributed and redistributed right now. Similarly, you've got the situation where, Africa could produce its own vaccine if it had access to IP and technology. And so we've been calling on Pfizer, Moderna to urgently share their technology with, say, for instance, the World Health Organization's hub set up in South Africa to produce mRNA vaccines as well. And so for Global Citizen, we've been mobilizing our citizens around the world to call on the G7 to act, to call on the G7 to ensure that we end the pandemic for everyone and ensure that groups like the NSSF and the government of Nigeria actually have that access to vaccines so that they can vaccinate their own citizens. But it is akin to a vaccine apartheid that we're seeing, develop around the world right now.
Okay, Mr. Folawiyo, you mentioned earlier about the three core areas you're looking at strengthening the healthcare system in Nigeria, supporting the vulnerable and reskilling the youth. This would need a lot of funding, huge funding, and I hear your target is like 20 billion naira.
Correct. And this was, thank you very much for that. This was something we thought out right in the middle of the pandemic, when we had lockdown and so on and so forth. And the idea at that time was that we recognized that some great initiatives were taking place to ameliorate the immediate situation then, building centers and isolation centers and so on. But we also recognized quickly that coming out of this thing, whenever we do come out of it, there will be a great demand for those issues I mentioned. And so we focused ourselves on trying to be there when the world is coming out of this pandemic and Nigeria is coming out of this pandemic. So we set ourselves a target of 20 billion naira just to start. You know as well as I do that 20 billion naira cannot even do the things we want to do. But we firmly believe that we have to start, and we have to start with impact. So we are, of the 20 billion, we've already raised 20 billion, which we roughly put at $50 million at the time. We've already raised $2.4 million without really we haven't gone out effectively. But we do believe that we can raise that money because we're not targeting any particular individual or group. We're targeting the whole of Nigeria. We're targeting everybody who has interest in Nigeria. 50 naira we will take, 100 naira we will take, and we'll also take 100 million and we'll take $1 billion. All we're trying to say is that for every well-meaning Nigerian, it's time to stop saying government can do everything. It's time to stop saying other people can do it. What can we do? We will give the same recognition to somebody who gives us 50,000 naira or 50 naira as we will to somebody who gives us 50 million naira. It's just saying that, look, if we all club together and we all come out to do the very little that we can do, we have 200 million people. Let's say, 50 million of those are earning. Is it too much to ask for 1,000 naira from 50 million people to help our country?
So, Mr. Folawiyo, since we're talking about you raising money now, if anybody watching now is inspired by what you have just said and is willing to help, what do they do?
Yes. We have an active website, which is world-class, which literally you can donate through that website. It's the Nigerian Solidarity Fund.ng/donate. And we will not only take your donation, we will acknowledge your donation. And on our website, you can see the donations coming in literally real time. So you can know what we're doing with the money. You can see how much money we're getting. And just to reinforce that, we have a world-class governance structure, which We have the board of directors of the NSSF consists of my humble self, Mr. Agbode Gemokweje, Mr. Uche Oji, the CEO of the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, and Mrs. Stella Ojeko-Onyejeli, who's also an ED of the NSIA. In addition, we have world-class partners, KPMG, Pricewaterhouse, in terms of grant administration and monitoring and evaluation. We have the best law firms in Nigeria as our legal advisors. So the watchword for us is accountability. We don't want people feeling that they gave money and they don't know what happened to it. We want them knowing that their money is acknowledged and it will be used for the exact purposes that we have set out to do. And we have governance structures that will ensure that anybody at any time can vet those operations of ours.
What's that website again, please?
It's the Nigeria Solidarity Support, the Nigeria Solidarity Fund, one word, .ng/donate.
Actually visited that site and I saw that so far, as at the time before this program started, you had 1.01 billion naira donated by 53 people. And 550 people have pledged action so far. So you have it cut out there. So let's talk a bit about the short-term Solidarity Support Fund, the medium-term and the long-term.
Like I said, the immediate short-term right now is to address the vaccine issue, which we feel, as Mick said earlier, that only 2% of Nigerians have been vaccinated so far. We need to speed that up. We need to increase that level. And what we're trying to do is to say, in bite-sized speed. We're not the only ones doing this. There are also other organizations doing it. But we say, okay, if we can do 1 million and 10 other organizations can do 1 million each, and not to mention what government is doing already, very quickly we can actually increase that level of vaccination in our society. So that's the first priority, because as everybody knows now, we're going to enter into a situation in the world now where they're going to be the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. And you will probably not be able to do much in this world if you're not vaccinated. That's just from the logistical aspect of things, but also from the health aspect. We don't know which variants are coming. We don't know what else is happening. And quite frankly, the level of vaccination in our society the indices are very low. And so we need to increase that rate, because otherwise we might be even more vulnerable to waves and waves of this virus. So that's the short term. Medium term is to also continue working with partners to raise the awareness about the post-COVID world, and how do we face that post-COVID world. The medium to long term, strengthen our healthcare facilities. They've been under serious assault by this pandemic period. Let's strengthen them. Let's help government in areas that they've already approved but they can't finish, and deepen the availability of healthcare to every Nigerian. And this goes as part of also the whole global citizen effort that we've been making over the last couple of years. But the final thing is, the long term is to see that it is clear from what we have seen, and your earlier segment I was watching with interest, is that technology is going to be key. We need to reskill our youth. The digital world is upon us. Creativity, art, entertainment. We need to give our youth those tools to be able to flourish. And so that's our long-term objective, that whatever we can do, and like I keep saying, we're not a messiah or anything like that. We're just trying to do our own little bit. And we believe that if everybody does their own little bit, at least the communal effort will yield some good results.
Mr. Sheldrick, Global Citizen is planning a big event in Lagos. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so Global Citizen in 2 weeks' time will be hosting a 24-hour globally broadcast event across 6 continents around the world, featuring over 55 artists. And thrilled to say that we will have the support of Burna Boy, Davido, Femi Kuti, Tiwa Savage, along with many other artists. And one of the host locations will be Lagos, Nigeria, which is really important because alongside Paris, London, and these other capitals of the world, we wanted to spotlight, one of the greatest cities in Africa, but also to really send this message. Tunde was just talking about the short-term objectives of the NSSF and what we were trying to achieve in terms of vaccine rollout in Nigeria. And I think from our point of view, we will be sending a clear message to the world that the G7, the EU, must begin to roll out and redistribute at least 1.7 billion doses now through to the end of the year. They need to share IP, they need to share technology and get people to step up. And hopefully this will also promote the work of the NSSF, rally partners behind to support their goal of vaccinating at least 1 million people. But our hope is that as a result, governments will step up and immediately redistribute those doses now, because what we're seeing is tragic. And as Tunde mentioned, we're seeing the scenario of the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. And as society continues to progress out of the pandemic, we will have this issue of this vaccine apartheid beginning to emerge around the world, which is just unfair and unacceptable.
Mr. Sheldrick, I know that you may have heard of vaccine nationalism, where countries who are producing these vaccines, they keep more than enough for their people, and other countries, they have the monies in their hands, yet they can't get this vaccine. Is there any role Global Citizen can play in the case of Nigeria so that even if we have the money, we can get the vaccines here?
Yeah, I mean, and this is where we really have to put pressure on the pharmaceutical companies, because we've got a situation where the vaccine manufacturing countries locked up supply. They were able to put themselves at the front of the queue. And so you had even institutions like COVAX with very, very noble goals to purchase vaccines on behalf of countries such as Nigeria. COVAX was put at the back of the queue. And so really, the best way we're going to address this challenge in the medium to long term is to actually increase the ability of countries around Africa to produce its own vaccines, because it's not just a question of money, it's a question of intellectual property. It's a question of having access to the technology. And at the moment, the World Health Organization worked, say, for instance, in South Africa to set up this hub to act as a transfer hub in order to access mRNA technology. And all Pfizer and Moderna have to do is partner with it, support it so that they could produce vaccines themselves, for around the continent. So it's really a question of supply right now. And we still have this production bottleneck. And the tragedy here is we foresaw this. This was not an unforeseeable disaster, what we're seeing roll out around the world. So we really have to see this extraordinary cooperation if we're to increase vaccine production. And as I said, the wealthy nations, the G7, the EU, those nations you mentioned that have an excess of supply, there is no reason why they should not be donating and redistributing more right now. Even when you take into account the need for a booster shot. As I said, there is 1.7 billion doses that will be sat in these countries through to the end of the year. Why can't we get these out right now and with urgency and speed? The United States has made some significant commitments in the hundreds of millions. We're hopeful in the next few weeks, maybe the European Union will step up as well and other governments as well. But ultimately, this is an issue that affects all of us. So long as the pandemic continues anywhere in the world, we continue to see variants that cause our economies to slow down, to lock down, and that cause an unmitigated disaster, especially for the most vulnerable and poor in our society and global community.
Okay, Mr. Folawiyo, what role is Lagos State playing in this big event you have coming up?
Lagos State have, from the early days of the introduction of global citizens into Nigeria, which was probably, like I said, a couple of years ago, 18 to 20 months ago, Lagos State have always acted as very good hosts and supporters for global citizens. His Excellency Governor Jide Sanwo-Olu, from the minute global citizen showed interest in Nigeria, has been at the forefront, and he understood the mission, and he has been very, very active in facilitating and giving support for whatever requirements the organization has for holding a concert here. But more importantly, also that it was COVID that actually caused the disruption, because we had support from the federal government, starting with the vice president and the foreign minister and information minister. All of them had been sensitized to the plans Global Citizen had for Nigeria, and those plans were actually to do with elimination of poverty, achieving the SDG goals for 2030. Nigeria being one of the most vulnerable countries in terms of the poverty indices. So this was started long before COVID came, and COVID just disrupted our plans, but also, in a funny way, sort of gave credence to the mission we had, which was, again, to alleviate poverty and help the most vulnerable. We just had to pivot to address the immediate issue, which is COVID. But that immediate issue seems to be becoming a medium and long-term issue. So to that extent, the authorities in Nigeria have been extremely cooperative and understanding of the mission that we have. So NSSF was a child born out of necessity when COVID hit. And of course, having had the background with Global Citizens, it was easy to adopt that template and adopt it to fight the immediate problem. And by the way, one other thing we're very sure of at the NSSF is that it's called the Nigerian Solidarity Support Fund for a reason. We believe that having set up this template, any other natural disasters, any other issues that have national significance, we can quickly address by populating and pivoting our template. So I think that's what I have to say about that. Thank you.
One of your aims is to alleviate poverty, and that was on the ground before COVID came along. Would you mind sharing with us what kind of plans you had to achieve that?
This is a very strong topic, and it's also a very important topic. Our view was that and that's what Global Citizens stands for. And we've Global Citizens, and Mick can speak for Global Citizens a bit later, but Global Citizens was set up and with the cooperation and encouragement of somebody like Amina Mohammed at the UN, who saw the value in what we were trying to do. The idea is to raise awareness, number one. Number two, to encourage governments and corporate citizens, well-meaning corporate citizens, to do what they can do to help alleviate poverty. And when we say help alleviate poverty, I mean, there's a statistic that Mick comes out with about, I think, 5% of what the world's billionaires, if they gave 5% of what they make in a year, the world's billionaires, that would be enough to address the poverty situation in Mick, can you help me out here with that?
Yeah. You're doing so well. I don't want to interrupt, but I think in answer to your question, even before the pandemic, the world had over the last 30 years made great strides to eliminate extreme poverty, and yet in the last few years we had actually seen that progress begin to halt, stall, and in some cases even begin to reverse, such as in Nigeria, where poverty numbers had began to rise, and Nigeria itself was on track to account for, I think, along with the DRC, over 40% of the world's extreme poor by the year 2040. And so from our perspective, there already needed to be urgent action towards this issue. The pandemic has only just brought that to the fore, because now, not only is progress stored, but globally, you've now got, for the first time in decades, the number of people living in extreme poverty rising. The World Bank expect perhaps as many as 160 million people will be pushed into extreme poverty by the end of the year. And to our point made earlier, yes, governments need to support. Yes, there are services governments need to provide, but also there is so much wealth in the world right now. And in fact, we've seen billionaire wealth skyrocket through the pandemic. And as Tunde was saying, if every billionaire in the world gave 5%, actually not even in the world, if every billionaire in the United States gave just 5% of their wealth annually, that would be enough to put us on track to end extreme poverty by 2030. And it was actually your foreign minister, Minister Jeffrey, when we announced Global Citizen Live, he made this comment. He said, at a time when we have billionaires competing to blast off into space, Global Citizen Live brings us back down to earth and reminds us that we must be our brothers and our sisters' keeper if we're to end extreme poverty. And so one of the important messages we're sending around the world is, yes, governments need to step up, but also billionaires need to step up their support as well. Here in the United States, we've got $1 trillion sat idle in private foundations, just accumulating interest that could be deployed right now. And it wouldn't take much to address some of these issues. For the 41 million people on the brink of famine around the world, $6 billion would be enough to provide meals to each of them for a year. And $6 billion, again, that is equivalent to, in many cases, how much was being spent or invested by the billionaires blasting off into space. So this is something which we believe can be a priority, and it needs to be a priority. Government support is vital. We need an upsurge in private wealth if we're to achieve this. And we need civil society to step up and hold billionaires accountable to actually meet their promises. If they've said that they've put money in a foundation, well, let's have that money rolled out to organizations on the grassroots, such as in Nigeria, that's working day in, day out to provide meals, healthcare, jobs, so that we can get everyone on track to defend the planet, defeat poverty, and ultimately end extreme poverty by 2030.
Before we wind down on this, which will be in a couple of minutes now, let's talk a bit more about the Global Citizens Live event. So it's going to happen later this month, or in October, you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, it will take place September 25, which is the tail end of the UN General Assembly week, when leaders will be discussing the biggest issues right now. And for us, it's also taking place a month before the G20 meetings in Italy at the end of October, and the COP26 meetings. And the three goals, we talk about this being a rallying call to defend the planet and defeat poverty, but the three calls really are on, one, making sure that the world provides urgently at least 1.7 billion doses to those who need it by the end of the year. Secondly, on climate change. The world made a promise, the rich countries made a promise to provide $100 billion a year in climate financing to help countries on the front lines deal with the challenges of climate change. And yet those promises are not being kept. And it's just not fair, because you look at Africa, which accounts for less than 4% of global emissions. They weren't the ones that caused the climate change impacts that we're seeing right now. And yet, they're being asked to step up. And those countries, the wealthy countries that promised support, haven't kept their promise. And the United States is one of the worst offenders in this regard. So we'll be sending a message that, look, we have to step up ahead of COP. Support has to be for those that are on the front lines, already dealing with the impacts of climate change. And I know in Lagos, this is always a hot topic when you look at rising sea levels. And finally, we'll also be sending a message around the hunger crisis, those 41 million people on the brink of hunger and starvation, and getting billionaires, corporations, and governments to step up and provide support right now. And people can tune in. This will be available in over 100 countries, including Nigeria, be broadcast 24 hours over September 25th, and sending this message to leaders around the world.
Okay, we are winding down now. Mr. Folawiyo, what word would you like to leave with us this morning, concerning this fund?
Thank you very much. And thanks for your time this morning. Look, what the final word from me is that we are all Nigerians. This is an organization, NSSF, built by Nigerians for Nigerians. Nothing is too small. It's time for us all to act. Let's stop criticizing and sitting back and expecting the next person to do it. Do your own bit. We will take money from anyone legitimately. We will take money from anyone who has money to give, so that we can all be proud and say that we have done our bit for Nigeria.
Thank you so much. And the website again is nigeriasolidarity.fund.ng/donate. We've been having a chat with the chairman, Nigeria Solidarity Support Fund, Mr. Babatunde Folawiyo, and the co-founder and Chief Policy Impact and Government Relations Officer at Global Citizens, Michael Sheldrick. And that's the website right there on your screen. Thank you so much, gentlemen. We'll go on another break. This is the final break, and we'll have the home stretch. So stay with us.